Involved with here in South Florida, and it is basically to just talk about, really have a conversation with three of our panelists about how we can make South Florida a better place when it comes to climate change, how we can make it more sustainable. So to start off, we're gonna have everyone introduce themselves, give us a little bit of a background on who you are, what you know, and really where your expertise stands.
Sure.
You want to start, Jane?
Sure. Jayneguilbert, Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Miami. I've been in this role for 2 years. It was set up when the City of Miami won becoming one of the 100 resilient cities in partnership with Miami-Dade County and Miami Beach. It's a new office where we're working across all the departments on strategies to both adapt to climate change in terms of sea level rise and heat, and to mitigate the actual causes of climate change through buildings and transportation. We're deep in strategy development at the moment.
We like to hear that, for sure, especially in South Florida. Okay, John, this is a familiar face, right? John Morales, our chief here.
Sure.
Tell everyone, I mean, we know you're the chief, but tell us more about yourself.
Well, I'm in my 10th year here at NBC 6 as Chief Meteorologist. As you all know, been on TV in this market for a long, long time, 27 years altogether from my time back in Spanish language TV. And prior to that, I was a NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration forecaster for the National Weather Service. Spent 7 years doing that. You'll laugh at this. Cornell Atmospheric Science product, and very, very, very invested in standing up in defense of the environment, standing up for action on climate. As a matter of fact, I'm a board member for the CLEO Institute, and you're going to meet our executive director pretty soon. And you know, and really these days, just standing up in defense of science, period, because it seems like science is under attack. So these are some of my passions and some of the advocacy that I work on. And
might I add, a great mentor for promoting, you know, how to go about that in broadcast meteorology and how to really help people, inform people, and someone that's also helping do that in our community. Yoca, tell people a little bit about who you are. John mentioned that you're part of the CLEO Institute.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Yoca Arditi-Rocha, and I'm the Executive Director of the CLEO Institute, which John proudly sits on our board. The CLEO Institute is probably the #1 nonprofit in the region focused on building climate education, climate literacy. We've been particularly in South Florida working with across all levels of society, trying to make people understand the devastating impacts of a changing climate and trying to make the connections, looking for community engagement and advocacy for climate solutions for a more resilient future. We work with universities, we work with municipalities, we work with business owners, and we work also in our most underserved communities here in South Florida, trying to get vulnerable communities to be future ready, trying to get them better prepared for the next extreme weather event. And I'm very pleased to be here to talk about ideas and solutions, because there are plenty out there that we can start implementing now.
And that's our goal. We want to talk about you know, the ideas, the solutions, and we want to get kind of some feedback from the audience. So I'm going to be taking a look at the iPad. We want you guys to send in your comments, questions, anything that you might want to add. And the whole idea of really the campaign that 100 Great Ideas does is they pick one subject and they take 5 days and they really get involved in the community and they want to hear the suggestions. So you guys, of course, are leaders on this subject in our community. So let's start off with just the obvious. What is a way that we locally are already seeing impacts from climate change and really the changing environment around us, and how are we being affected here in South Florida? I'll let you start with that, Jane.
Sure. So the two main impacts are, one, we're increased atmospheric heat. So we have, since 1970, 70 more days a year that are over 90 degrees, and that's increasing each year. And then in terms of sea level rise, because of that increased heat, it's expanding our oceans. As water heats up, it expands. Pot of water boils over. thermostat goes up as it heats. That's expanding. So that's where most of it's happening. And we've had about 8 inches since 1953 and 3.5 inches since 1992. And we're expecting to see another probably 6 to 10 by 2030. And possibly 2 feet by 2040 to 2050. There's a lot of uncertainty as we get further out into the future, because the other thing that's happening that's making the sea levels rise is the melting ice caps, and those are a little more unpredictable in terms of their...
And land ice. I think that's one thing. I'm sure, John, you can talk about this. A lot of times people will start this conversation with us. We here in South Florida have great people that are in the community that want to know more, and they ask about it, and there's a misunderstanding with, between sea ice melting and land ice melting. When the land ice is melting, we're adding more water, and I think people are confused about that. Is there any other things that you oftentimes hear people misunderstand when it comes to this topic?
Well, I mean, I think the whole uncertainty is part of the reason people are a little bit confused. I mean, it's just so hard to wrap your head around something that, first of all, is expected or seen as something that's going to happen down the road, when if you think about some of the things that have been happening lately, it's actually happening right now.
Right.
From the insane amount of wildfires that we're seeing in California, to the more intense tropical cyclones when they form around the world, to the excessive rainfall events that we're seeing with great frequency, to the rapid development of drought, which happens faster because of the higher temperatures and therefore greater evaporation. In other words, droughts can form faster. And of course, the obvious heat waves, which we're used to the heat here in South Florida, but I mean, we have had some very deadly heat waves around the world of late. So a lot of this is happening right now. Nevertheless, people constantly hear, by 2100, so-and-so is going to happen. And by 2100, maybe we'll get anywhere from 2 feet to 6 feet or 8 feet of sea level rise. I think the whole concept of people looking towards the end of the century makes people somewhat confused in thinking that it's somebody else's problem, when in reality, it's very much of our problem, because the sea level rise that you were describing, Jane, we don't have to wait for it to get to 12 inches, 36 inches, 6 meters for us to start to see the effects locally. There's going to be a domino effect, particularly when it comes to some of the economic consequences of our rising seas, from insurance to property values to all these other things, that are going to be problems for our generation and then our children and our grandchildren. So I think a lot of it, people need to, if you're thinking 2100, you need to get out of that mentality and think about the fact that these changes are happening today.
Yeah, it's not just the polar bears that are going to see it. We are seeing it. Yoca, let's take it one step further. John mentioned, 2100, but what does the next decade look like? And then beyond that, what do the next several decades look like if we don't change?
Right. If business as usual, as mentioned, we're going to see a lot of these impacts become a lot more aggravated. And a few other impacts that we're already seeing in South Florida that we should point out is that we're already seeing many places in our county that are getting saltwater intrusion in our drinking water supply. Our drinking water supply comes from an aquifer, and as the sea level starts to rise, our limestone ground is very porous, and you start seeing salt water getting water into a lot of our wells. In fact, in my own community, we have already evidence of saltwater intrusions. I get my water from a well, by the way. So to me, that's very concerning. We're already seeing a lot of bleaching of our coral reef system. systems, and in a very in a much warmer world, the new IPCC, which is that UN body based on many scientists around the world, just published their latest report. In a 1.5 degree or 2 degree increase by the end of the century, we will see all coral reef systems disappear in the entire planet. Of course, coral reef systems are our first line of defense for coastal cities. Yeah. They're also nurseries for our fisheries. They provide us a lot of ecosystem benefits, and we're going to see increased heat waves, increase and more intensification of extreme weather events like John mentioned. So everything will become a lot more exacerbated. We're going to see a lot more drought. We're going to see a lot more famine. We're going to be probably seeing civil unrest in many of countries around the world that are already very vulnerable and facing food insecurity, because climate change is impacting the air we breathe. It's impacting the food we eat, the water we drink, and our climate. We're going to be seeing a lot of exacerbated problems because of increasing temperatures.
Yeah, and it doesn't discriminate. That includes all of us globally. Yeah. So we're not just doom and gloom. We want to talk about you know, some of the things that people can do, and some of the things that you guys yourselves are already doing. One or two maybe things that you guys are passionate about, solutions, little things that you've actively started doing in your own lives that kind of are helping out with this big issue. John, I know you're very passionate about solar.
Yeah, I'm chomping at the bit here.
Yeah,
because,
I see you.
You know, there's so many opportunities. You know, this is the Sunshine State. We're here in Florida, particularly in South Florida, and the power of the sun I mean, it is intense. You know how you can burn to a crisp if you're out there in the middle of the day in South Florida. Well, let me tell you, if you have some solar panels, you can really rein in that power, and it's going to cut big time expense off of your FP&L bill. Now, I'm a part of a solar cooperative, and these solar co-ops that are available in South Florida and elsewhere in the state provide the opportunity to have the support, and not just financial support, which you can through them find a way to, if you want to finance your solar installation, but they also provide the technical support. In other words, you're not doing it alone. So these solar co-ops, look them up, and I tweet a lot about them, and you can look at my timeline on Facebook as well, is really a great way to participate in reining in the power of the sun to power at least part of your life. I mean, I also drive an electric car, so that, you know, my electric car is basically powered by the sun, because I'm not paying FP&L to move my car. I'm just getting it off the sun. Yes, it had to invest in my solar panels, but by year 6 or 7, I would have paid off my entire investment. Wow. Just in the savings from Florida Power and Light that I don't have to pay the power company, and I like that.
Wow.
I like it too. I got solar power. Unfortunately, I got it right before the co-ops went into place, but the city of Miami is actually hosting a big solar event with the solar co-ops coming up on December 1st. At the Little Haiti Cultural Center. All day you can learn about solar, learn how to advocate, learn about electric vehicles. It's a very powerful way to make a change in becoming more carbon neutral.
Exactly.
Certainly, there are many things people can do before they even, if they don't own a home, or if they're not able to invest in solar. Our buildings are one of our largest consumers of energy. Transportation is another very large consumer of energy and producer of greenhouse gases. And then, of course, how we eat and what we do with our food waste is another big issue. So there are things people can do in their everyday life. Eat more plant-based food. Think about wasting less food. I compost at home, which is also very satisfying not to have that go into the garbage can and have such a light garbage can every week.
I like those two. Those last two that you mentioned, eating a more plant-rich diet and ending food waste, are huge solutions that anybody can really implement and cost $0. In fact, you can actually save money and live a much healthier style. And speaking of solutions, the Drawdown Project, which is probably one of the most comprehensive plans ever proposed out there for reversing global warming, has them rank in number 3 and number 4 of the most with most impact. So eating a plant-rich diet and ending food waste is something that everybody can start doing today.
Exactly. Exactly.
So for everyone joining us, I know there's some people, we're on Facebook Live, so people are coming into the conversation. We are with 100 great ideas, and we're talking about how people in our community here in South Florida can kind of get involved with making a difference with climate change and sustainability. So we've talked about some of the solutions, but what about for people that feel passionately about it and want to kind of advocate for some of these solutions or advocate for changes? Do you guys have any suggestions, maybe Yoca, what people in our very own community can do to feel like they're making a difference, not just with their compost and with not wasting as much food and stuff like that, but getting the word out?
Yeah. Well, we always say that we need all to use our superpowers, and we have the powers of the purse, and every time we make a purchase, we're sending those market signals for change. The power of our vote to make sure that we are demanding from elected officials to act on climate, and the power of our voice. Everybody can be a messenger and be advocating for the solutions we need. At the CLEO Institute, we offer several options for people to become engaged, and really one of the programs that I really enjoy is our Climate Speakers Network, where people can get trained, learn the science, and become advocates in their own communities, in their churches, with their homes. I mean, within their families or at work. They can be doing and they can be educating others by getting trained with us. So becoming a climate speaker is a great way to do it. We also train other members of society, especially in some of our most underserved communities, to become advocates, at 10 commissioners meetings at the city level and at the county level. So we can all be part of the change, and we're always encouraging everybody to participate.
I need to piggyback on what you're saying, because I am extremely passionate. The way I got involved with CLEO was I saw that there was going to be a Climate 101 training for anybody that wanted to walk in and learn more about climate change science. So it was open to the public, so I said, well, I'm going to check out what this is. It was over a weekend at the University of Miami. And I walk into this, and they have professors from UM, you know, from the Rosenthal School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, and from the Geology Department, and I mean, and all these folks teaching in layman terms the basics of climate change science. And I go, wow, what a great organization. And then, you know, what you're saying, which is the training you, who are watching us right now, on the science, so that you too can explain it to others in layman terms. How empowering is that for you, and then the people that later get to become more educated on what's going on in terms of the changing climate? That type of empowerment is what moves the levers. Because you mentioned something very, very important. It is imperative that national, well, actually, let me start, local, state, national, and other countries' leaders be aware of the science, be understanding of it, certainly not be denying the science, so that we can have the type of leadership that can steer the world in the right direction. Listen, we're not going to stop this train. This train has left the station. It is going to continue to warm, but we need to decelerate this train. We need to brake it enough so that the consequences, which we're already seeing, don't become so extreme that we end up with a world that's very difficult to live in for our grandchildren. So having those leaders be the right ones, the ones that are accepting in science, having those people be elected, that's all about education. If the constituency, if the public is voting for the right people, we're going to have the right leadership out there. And that's why the education that CLEOinstitute.org does is so important.
Thank you, absolutely. Yeah. Plug right there. So Jane, do you have anything to piggyback off of that, how people can kind of make their voices heard, or any little solutions that they can do, or maybe even get involved with your organization?
Sure. So, for one, I will piggyback on the power of the voice. I've seen it in front of our city commission meetings, and the commissioners hear and what people are concerned about. Our voters a year ago went to the polls and voted for the Miami Forever bond. $200 million of that is to help the city adapt to sea level rise and flood mitigation investments. So we're very busy activating those, but it's not enough. And yes, we need to address drawing down the carbon through how we live, move, eat, all those things. But we also need to plan and adapt to the inevitable changes that are already happening. The $200 million for flood mitigation is a great start, but it's not enough. So we need people to be advocating at the state and federal level about what the costs are, and maybe policies that both generate revenue from making sure there's a fee for using carbon or something like that can help pricing carbon, so that we can invest in the infrastructure locally, not just public infrastructure, whether it's new drainage systems and green infrastructure or pumps, etc., but also helping our residents adapt their own homes. And that's a critical piece of the solutions that we need to.
And you mentioned that you guys have already done some adaptations. What are those? Just to give people kind of an inside look in what you've been doing. Obviously, you mentioned there's more to do, but what have you guys already done?
Sure. So the city of Miami has really stepped up its game in the last couple of years. In part, we got to learn from Miami Beach that faced tidal flooding before we did, and this year, king tide, we installed some backflow preventer valves to make sure that the sea can't go back up through the drain on a sunny day, and in our most vulnerable areas, and those were very effective. We also had some temporary pumps out there. We ended up luckily not having to use them that much, but they were there and could monitor it. And we flew drones over the city to monitor where all the king tides were flooding, to make sure we could see it. We've also flown drones with LiDAR to track our whole waterfront levels to see where our most vulnerable parts are, because we're right now in the process of updating our whole stormwater master plan. And this will feed into how we're responding with the bond. But we've just put in, I know last year we had some big rain events that flooded the Brickell area. I don't know if you remember that. Well, since then we've installed one pump system and upgraded another pump system, and they're operating with much greater efficiency. This king tide, we had no flooding in the Brickell area whatsoever. So those are some quick wins. We're looking to do more of those backflow valves very quickly, and then with this first bucket of bond money, we're looking to do some demonstration projects where we can really demonstrate how, with investments in a park, in a neighborhood, in a bay walk, we not only are going to make us more resilient to the impacts of climate change, but we're going to add other quality of life benefits at the same time for the environment, for the people to be able to move in different ways, etc. So very excited about that.
Very excited about that. We're with you on that. So, John, let's transition to kind of media and the role that we have in climate change and the messaging and the advocacy and even the education. For a lot of people, you and I and our other team of meteorologists, the other members of it, we're the closest thing that they have in their homes to a accredited scientist, someone that has experience and knowledge on the topic. So tell us a little bit about how you've taken on that role and just helping educate people and how the media could be better, honestly.
Well, I mean, let me start by congratulating you specifically on some of the work that you've done because if, you know, I think there's no other station in South Florida that does more climate and environmental reporting than this station right here, NBC6. And you're a big part of that. And so is Steve McLaughlin and our entire team, Adam Berg, Ryan Phillips as well. But Steve and you in particular have been out there reporting on these issues quite frequently. And again, we do it more than anybody else. So I'm very, very proud of that. More than anything, it is about education, I feel. I mean, I think the more people are exposed to the facts, right, and not alternative facts, right, regarding science, because science, after all, is the best understanding that we have of whatever's happening out there. It's been based on peer review. It's been based on years and years of study. And I think through the scientific method, we weed out the nonsense, and we know where we're headed. Now, as far as climate communications in general, climate issues, you know, I think there ought to be more broadcast meteorologists involved in talking, making the link between extreme weather and climate as often as it happens. As you said, we're the one scientist people have, if not in their living rooms in the evening on TV, well, at least, you know, maybe on their smartphone or whatnot. We're there for you every day. You trust us. We're good communicators. We're scientists. We understand the peer-reviewed literature, and we can digest that for you and give you the information. If there were more of us doing that, like I do, and I've been doing for years, and I'm very proud of how much I discuss this on air and online, I think the situation in America, where for years we had this problem where people were somewhat confused about the subject of climate change, you know, despite the deliberate misinformation campaign from some of the greater economic interests in this country, people wouldn't be as confused as they were for years. Thankfully, I think we're past that stage. Yeah. People are starting to understand the science a little bit more. The vast majority of Americans know that global warming is happening, and it's caused by humans. So we've gone a little bit past that stage. Now it's a matter of getting our political leaders to understand that too.
Yeah, and I think getting people to understand, like you mentioned earlier, that it's not a distant future thing, that we're actually feeling the effects now, and will continue for you know, the next decade and continue on. Yeah. So, Yoca, when we talk about education, obviously John mentioned, you know, we can help educate people here on the media side, but if people are looking for more education, John mentioned you guys did the Climate Change 101. Where else can people get trustworthy information? A lot of times people don't know where they can go. They you know, for information that is accurate and trustworthy, where can they go?
Wow, there are so many trusted sources, but let's start by two probably of the first ones that I go to, which is NOAA, and John mentioned them earlier, and NASA. Mm-hmm. They have probably the most current data out there, and it's open to the public. We used to have another trusted source called the Environmental Protection Agency, but with all the recent rollbacks, there has been some information gone missing from the website. But overall, I would say those will be two of the main sources that I tend to consult myself, and anybody can get a hold of. We at the CLEO Institute hold those climate trainings on a monthly basis. Most of them are free and open to the public, so if anybody's interested, they can always look at our Facebook page or at our website at cleoinstitute.org to see where the latest training is going to be happening. Those are free, and we host also an annual climate conference, also like the one that John mentioned. We partner with a local university. This year we're partnering with Florida International University, where we bring local and national scientists from all these prestigious organizations to talk about the latest science. So there are plenty of opportunities out there.
There are places people can go. Mm-hmm. All is not lost. We still have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of engagement from our audience, so I want to touch base. We have a lot of questions coming in. So here's one that comes from Luis Rodriguez. My question to the panelists is, It is well known by now that we should expect to see sea level rise of 6 or more feet by 2100. This means a large part of Miami-Dade, especially Miami Beach, which highest elevation is 6.2 feet on the beach dunes, will be underwater. What do you think we should do to start planning for the new reality? Shouldn't we start discussing a vision for a new Greater Miami and potentially relocation now, or when is the right time? So a lot of questions in there. Anyone feel like they want to jump into that?
Well, Jane, I want you to weigh in on this, but
yeah,
I want Luis to understand that so it could be 6 feet, it could be 3 feet, it could be 8 feet or 12 feet. I mean, there's a range because 2100 is pretty far in the future, okay? And we have thermal expansion of the oceans, as you mentioned, Jane.
Yes.
We have the big uncertainties of the land-based ice in Antarctica, in Greenland, and the small contribution from the glaciers elsewhere in the world. But I mean, those two big ones, Antarctica and Greenland, are certainly big question marks as to how quickly they're going to melt. Now, I'll transition here to, what do we do? Is the R word included? Do we speak about retreat? My personal belief, Jane, and again, I want you to weigh in, is it's not a matter of running away, but we have to plan for this. We have to plan financially, number one, because if I own property in Miami Beach and I was planning to have that be inheritance for my children, I wouldn't think it's going to be worth much towards the second half of this century. It's not about running away, but I'm financially planning for what I'm expecting is going to be an issue. And I think the same is going to apply to some parts of Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So this is a great question, and we do get it quite often. I think it's really important to look at planning horizons that we can get our brain around, and also, no city plans. Actually, a 10-year plan is a long-range plan. We're looking at a 40-year plan at the moment at the city, and that feels pretty long. I know Miami Beach is doing the same. I think the dunes are actually a little higher, but that's okay. But it's regardless, we need to face this issue head-on in front and look at it and have the opposite of panic and or denial and stick your head in the sand. We can't have either of those things because we have time to adapt. There are different solutions that are going to be used at different time periods. So right now we're looking at solutions. I mentioned the backflow valve. So that'll, in a lot of those areas for 10 years, that's what we need, and it'll last. You don't want to invest too much money up front until it's needed, and then you want to. If it's an infrastructure that you want to last for 40 to 50 years, you have to build those projections into how you build it, whether it's a seawall or it's a road or it's a pump system. If you want it to last that long, you build whatever those, and if it's critical investment, you use some of the higher NOAA curves and use those predictions. We've done some short, medium, and long-term planning. We did one in one neighborhood in Miami called Shorecrest, and we're right now designing infrastructure solutions for the next 15, 30 years there, and then looking at when we're going to have to add a pump or some other things. But we're also looking at whether we also need to have some of that property go back to a more blue-green space where it can allow the water to go in. So I think there's definitely going to need to be selective retreat.
Yes, yes, selective retreat.
And to look at ways to help people through that transition. But yeah, I think we can't not look at that. But we also have a lot of solutions in our toolbox that can protect our properties for quite some time.
And if I may add, also, I agree, we definitely have tons of solutions, but while we need to be planning for to adapt for the next challenges in the next couple of decades, we also need to tackle the problem at the root. and we need to start looking at aggressive mitigation effort at the state and national level, and that's something where I see a lot of opportunity. We need to start really looking at pricing carbon, because right now oil and gas companies are just polluting our atmosphere as if it was an open sewer. Companies cannot pollute our waterways, companies cannot pollute our streets. We as citizens cannot dump trash on our streets. Why are the oil and gas industry polluting our atmosphere with no sort of consequence? And also for renewables and clean energy technologies to be at an even playing field, we need to price carbon accurately. We need to be accounting all the externality, everything that is costing society to cope with a changing climate, all the costs to our health, all the costs to our cities and our infrastructure, and putting in the right price. Then we're going to see the floodgates open, and then we're going to be able to see that exponential curve we're all expecting from renewables, which they continue to grow, but with the brakes on. We need to make sure that we're pricing carbon, and I think we need to look at different policy opportunities, whether it's a carbon fee and dividend or whatever we want to call it, but we definitely need to be able to send in those market signals so we can increase the innovation and increase the scaling of renewable technologies that are out there,
and charge the cost to society at its source. And we'll all have a transition to go through. I mean, we're all in this together, right? We drive cars, we consume
absolutely.
products that use petroleum, so we're all in it together.
Yeah.
It's not just an us-them thing. We have to acknowledge that we're all in it together, but we have to your point, change the balance on the economy so that so we reduce those costs to our society. They're massive.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question comes from David McDougall, and he wants to know if we have any ideas for ways to entice South Florida communities to participate in the solutions that we've mentioned in large quantities. What can we do to make sure that it's not just 2 people, while we like as many people as we can get, but what can we do to kind of get a large group of people to do it?
Well, I think campaigns like this really help, because with the power of social media and uniting forces from many organizations that are participating are really going to help spread out the voice, and also be able to pile together a lot of solutions, and getting feedback from the community is important. I think education is a huge component. I know a lot of people are worried about all the environmental crisis we're seeing here in Florida. You know, the algal bloom is something that it has been in the media covered tremendously, but not many people are making the connection to a warming climate, warming waters. And so when you have an informed community, when you have informed citizens, people can make those choices, those better choices that are needed. So education is key. You know, you as weather broadcasters and meteorologists play a pivotal role. You're a trusted source of information. You know, when a hurricane is coming, everybody's really trusting you. They need to trust you also for the science that a warming climate is happening and is made by us. So, you know, uniting all our voices, I think it's crucial. But education is key.
And you know, Angie, I would add that if people understood that this is about science and it's not about politics, right? So, you know, Vice President Gore is the best thing and the worst thing to ever happen to the subject of climate change in this country. He was out there trying to educate, but because he was a politician, it immediately, the tag of this being a political subject became the thing to talk about. And unfortunately, almost more than any other country, there's very few countries in this world that outrival us in terms of having made the subject of climate change such a political issue. Maybe Australia, maybe. I mean, maybe Poland, now in Poland. But this is not political, it's scientific. No. So if people realize that and said, hey, man, we're just advocating, I mean, put whatever image you want. If you want to think of the polar bears, which, I mean, have a 94% chance of extinction by 2100, I mean, the polar bears are going to be gone. unless we change course here. But if that's too distant and too Arctic, and you want to think of something different, and you don't like mosquitoes, and you don't want to deal with Zika, and you're thinking that Zika is going to expand to the Carolinas and expand up to New York City, well, think of it that way then. It's science. It's the impact on the ecosystem, and by the way, the ecosystem services humans. There's a concept known as ecosystem services, which we garner all the benefit from. Yeah. And if ecosystems are damaged by the changing climate and our harming of the environment through all the other ways that we're harming it beyond increasing temperatures, we're the ones who suffer in the end, because we lose the ecosystem services that have so well served us over the last 10,000 years when we were flourishing on this planet. So it's a pivotal moment in history. I really think it is. And we ought to be out there demanding that if we're going to be the generation that's going to be looked back upon as to, what did you do to stop this? If late this century or the beginning of the next century, people are saying, look at what the people in the 20th and early 21st century did. They did nothing. Well, at least I'm proud to say that I wasn't part of the folks that didn't do anything. And you should get involved and should protest and should get out there and demand action on climate.
And numerous people in our group are saying it's not a partisan issue; it's a human issue. One thing that people have been asking about climate gentrification. Anyone feel like they want to touch on that subject?
Sure,
Jane.
I can talk about it. It's been a subject. We have a advisory committee to our city commission called the Sea Level Rise Advisory Committee, and that topic has come up a couple of times. In the city of Miami, our highest grounds, some of our highest grounds are Little Haiti and Liberty City, and they are undergoing very, very intense development pressures. Right. Certainly, there would be development pressures there if there was even if there wasn't climate change, but that is just making it that much stronger. So the committee is actually asking, they're going before our commission on Thursday and requesting that the administration do more research into what can be done to mitigate the impacts of that. And the city, part of this Miami Forever bond is $100 million to preserve and create more affordable housing. And the mayor has set a very bold goal of 12,000 preserved or new units by 2024, which we're working on how to build that pipeline of projects, both with the bond financing, but with policies and private partnerships. So that money will be used towards helping people stay in place, shore up their homes, weatherize their homes, make them more efficient, but then also have covenants to be able to stay there in time. Maybe look at tax abatement policies, look at more rental housing. Some of these people are renters and they're getting out. So if we can have this naturally occurring affordable housing, receive weatherization, efficiency retrofits, to adapt, and then ask that homeowner to keep the rents low. That would be another way that we could address it. So those are some of the strategies we're looking at. The issue with Miami, I mean, people want to live in Miami, and we have a lot of foreign buyers here. We have areas that are lower lying that are having development pressure too. Little Havana is another one. Right. So it's not a universal thing, but it is an element that's happening in our city.
And one of those things that I think is I don't want to say an afterthought, because that's not the right way to put it, but it's not the immediate, it's not at the front of people's minds, but again, another thing that is being affected by this changing climate. So there's so many, exactly. It's not just the polar bears, it's not just the sea level rise, there's many, many effects. So we're about to wrap up. You guys can keep your questions coming. We'll try to log on and answer those directly through the comment section.
It has been dubbed an environmental issue. It's not. Climate change is a humanitarian issue. It's about, you know, people's lives. Yes. And people's lives are being impacted all around the world. Here at home, we've been battered by extreme weather events, outbreaks of Zika, algal bloom crisis, climate gentrification in our most vulnerable communities here in Miami. It's about people's life. It's not really about polar bears. So if there's something that I want to leave everybody behind is that, you know, think about how climate change is going to affect you. Think about when is it going to be personal for you. Perhaps it already is and you haven't realized it. Perhaps you're already suffering from allergies all year round because allergies are on the rise because of increased pollen production, because of increased CO2 levels. So think about your own environment and think about where climate change has already affected you, because climate change is going to affect us all. We all live under the same roof called an atmosphere. And it may not affect us equally, but we're all going to be affected by it.
John.
Well, I guess my closing thoughts will be basically on the science, just briefly to say, listen, yeah, you know, the climate has always changed, but it's never changed at the rate it's changing right now. And we know that left up to natural forcing, in other words, volcanoes, solar output, you know, things having to do directly with the physics of space and Earth, we wouldn't be warming. And that's been proven many times through computer model runs, but also through observations of what we're seeing, the trends out there. So it's undeniable, you know, it's us, it's bad, but we can act, and there is hope. So, like Yoca said, we need to take action to be able to mitigate enough this problem so that it doesn't become more extreme than it's already becoming. And if we can keep it manageable by limiting the warming to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees Celsius globally averaged, according to the goals from the United Nations, I think that would be fantastic if we could keep it to 2 degrees Celsius. If not, then the adaptations are going to be extremely costly. It's going to cost our pocketbooks. It's going to cost in terms of damage to properties. It's going to cost, if you have any empathy for, you know, the less fortunate people around the world, those are the ones who pay the most, because they're the most vulnerable to the extreme weather events that we're starting to see. So between empathy and the pocketbook and the truthfulness of the science, I think those are enough reasons for you to find ways to demand action on climate.
Jane.
So this is 100 great ideas, and I think the more we can focus on solutions, the more we can focus on what we can do, whether it's in your own personal life and writing your own commitments, or writing your ideas for local government, state government, national government. How can we mobilize more people towards national government? I'll be listening. We'll be reviewing the report that comes out. So I just really encourage the people on watching and online to really think hard about what their solutions are. They all have their superpower, as you said earlier. So you all have your superpower. Bring it out.
I like that. That's a good way to end it. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on this Monday evening. We want to thank all of you guys as well for being a part of this conversation. 100 great ideas, this campaign, really important. We hope you continue to be interacting with us in the comments section. We'll try to get there and answer some of those questions. I do want to remind you guys that on Friday at 2 p.m., our colleague Steve McLaughlin will be hosting another one of these panels where they'll continue the conversation, talk about more stuff, and you can also continue to get involved there. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me on this Monday evening.
Thank you, Angie.
We'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.